To the January 20th work session. And for those viewers at home, I'm Councilmember Linda Gorton, and in the absence of the mayor and the vice mayor, I will be chairing the meeting. So we will go ahead on this inauguration day and have comment from the public on issues on the agenda. Is there anyone who wants to make comment on an issue which is on the agenda? Will you please go to the podium, Mr. Farmer? Apparently there's no one signed up, so if you have a comment, please.
I know that
Will you
Mr.
say
Means
your
is
name and address, please?
Bill Farmer, 821 Euclid Avenue, Lexington.
Welcome.
Thank you. I know that Mr. Means is going to make commentary about updating you all on the parking issue. I just wanted to kind of take a moment to ask for the ability to talk after he does, just to make a couple of points, perhaps in rebuttal or just in addition to what he says. That's my only point about being here right now.
So you're asking special exemption. Is this correct?
Well, I don't want to go out of order. I know he has
Okay.
comments he wants to make, and
You'd like to hear what he has to say?
that's all right.
Okay,
And then I
very
just had a couple of things to add.
Does that suit the council?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
With dispensation now.
Our next item on the agenda is requested rezoning and docket approval. And we do have a rezoning, and I believe Councilmember Blues has a motion. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to place on the docket for work session an ordinance amending Articles 28-4H5, 28-5H5, 17-3C, and 17-5 of the zoning ordinance to allow additional signage in the mixed-use community MU3 zone. So moved.
We have a motion by Councilmember Blues and a second by Councilmember Ellinger to place the ordinance on the docket. Do I have any discussion?
I'm not sure if that needs to be moved on the docket without a public hearing.
Yes. I believe that would be correct.
Yes.
So
And
do you want to include
I
without a public?
would include without a public hearing.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
I should add, Madam Chair, that I will at the council meeting add an amendment to to this item, and I think that council members have been sent the amendment language, but I'll add it formally at the council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And I believe if there are any questions, we will welcome Chris Westover, attorney, former Urban County Government attorney. Do council members have questions about this right now? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Now, are there any other motions for the docket? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the docket as amended?
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilmember Ellinger, second by Councilmember James to approve the docket as amended. Any discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. And we should be using our electronic voting, perhaps? Yes. Okay. The next item of business on our agenda is approval of the summary. January 13th, pages 7 through 10. Do I hear a motion? Councilmember Ellinger moves and Councilmember Beard seconds. Approval of the summary. Any questions or comments? If not, those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Next item is budget amendments. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Beard to approve, Councilmember Ellinger to second. Is there discussion or questions about budget amendments? If not, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Moving on to new business. Do we have a motion for approval? Councilmember Blues moves approval of new business. Councilmember Henson seconds. Are there questions about new business? Councilmember James.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On item M, if someone from Community Development or Commissioner Coe is here, just had a question for some clarification on one item. It says 40, and within, well, the brief summary says 20, and on page 32 it gives mention of the number 40. If anyone can clarify how many properties will be affected? Is there no one here that can answer? I see someone coming forward. Ms. Pfister? If you don't have the answer, it's not going to affect it getting on there. I just wanted to get clarification because the language was different.
No, I do not have the answer, but I will get an answer from Community Development for
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. That's all I have.
Are there other questions about new business items? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, like sign. Those items pass, and now we'll go on to continuing business and presentations. And I believe the first item is the Quarters Committee, and I was informed that we do not have a report, we don't have a chair, and the committee needs to be reconstituted. So we'll skip that if it's okay with council members. And then the second item is our intergovernmental report from Councilmember James.
Sure, one moment.
And council members, this is page 38 of your packet.
The Intergovernmental Committee met for the first time in 2009 on January the 13th. I was reelected as chair of the committee and haven't yet selected a co-chair, but still looking for anyone to step forward to volunteer for that. Really, we had a report out of the Citizens Advocate Working Group, and there were several of those items that needed more conversation, but there were a couple of motions that came out from that. Of those, I will bring forward to the council as a motion as well. I believe that's what I need to do, so, okay. So I bring forward a motion directing the Citizens Advocate Office to work with the CIO to produce a periodic program on GTV3 in order to let citizens know that they have an impartial venue to report problems or complaints.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you. And just to elaborate just a little bit more on that, that is, we all have our council reports that we show on GTV3, and other divisions make reports. I think the mayor's office makes reports. We just wanted to be able to give that citizens advocate the opportunity to let folks know that she is available and what her role is. So we'll be looking forward to seeing that on GTV3. We also had, as part of the Citizens Advocate Work Group, they talked about a software solution which may help tracking data a little bit easier. That data may also be able to be used by council members and staff. So I bring forward to the council a motion to direct the Citizens Advocate Office to work with the CIO and council office staff to identify software solutions for logging and tracking data, which could also be useful for council members and staff.
We have a motion by Councilmember James from the committee, second by Councilmember Crosby. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you. And just to elaborate just a bit on that, we are aware that this may cost some budgeting funds, and all we're asking for is just to identify what that software solution could possibly be to have that conversation during the budget session. The other item that we discussed that day was some boards and commissions reporting. And from this, let me review this. This motion came about based on having our boards and commissions publicly note and put their minutes and have those available to our citizens and have them potentially available electronically on our website. So I bring this to you in the form of a motion that all outside boards and commissions should submit an annual report and meeting minutes to the LFUCG administration for publication on the LFUCG website.
Motion by the committee, second by Councilmember Crosby. Any discussion? Councilmember Blues?
How will the boards and commissions be informed?
I'm sorry?
How will the boards and commissions be informed, and who will do the informing?
We were, I believe, leaving that up to the administration to do so, and Shay has raised her hand, so I think she's doing it. Maybe personal phone calls. I don't know what she's doing to contact. And you want to come forward? Thank you, Shay.
In the intergovernmental committee's packet that you had last week, there's a sample letter that we're planning on sending to all of the chairs of all the boards, and also any Urban County government divisions that staff the boards will be copied on those letters as well. We'll be asking commissions and boards to submit the minutes, and then at the end of each year we'll send them a reminder to give us an annual report, which will more or less be, did you meet, how many times did you meet, have you submitted your minutes, and so forth. And if we find boards that did not meet at all, then it's certainly something that we'll bring to you so we can talk about whether or not they need to continue. But we'll notify them by mail and copy staff among the divisions.
If it would be appropriate, I can give a copy of that letter to all council members, just so that you have that.
And that letter was a draft letter, but once we send out the official one, I can send it to the committee.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions about the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you very much.
That's it.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Councilmember James. Our third item is the Parking Authority update, and we have Gary Means here, who's the Executive Director, and I just did want to be sure from council members that we did just receive the information for the presentation today, shortly before noon, so is it all right to go ahead with the presentation, make an exemption to our 72-hour rule? Welcome.
Again, my name is Gary Means. I'm with the executive. I'm the executive director of the Lexington and Fayette County Parking Authority, and I'm glad to be in front of you and get an opportunity to kind of give you an update on some of the things that we've been doing in the last 6 months. And if you'll recall, July 1st of '08 was when we rolled out the Lex Park program. And how's this going to work here? I wanted to back up before we get into the conversation related to the new meters. I think was what, in the Chevy Chase area, is what drove you all to inviting me back, just to give you sort of an overview of some of the things that we've done in an effort to get out the information. Branding, by the way, would be just coming up with the Lex Park name and the logo. We put together maps and brochures. One of the big things that we rolled out was a website. It's the first time any affiliate with the Urban County governments had a website related to parking. And then, of course, lots of press releases and TV and radio ads, especially during the month of July when we first rolled it out. Then we had that warning program where we wrote a warning citation for any first-time offender for the first 3 months. We had an amnesty program where you were able to pay outstanding tickets that were $30. It was reduced to $20 in an effort to help folks get their records cleaned up before we rolled out any other additional enforcement. And then just the overall ambassadorial approach with what we're calling the Outriders, and that's the parking enforcement folks. This was one of the mailers that went out to businesses. We sent this to about 1,800 businesses, and it took the take. And again, Group CJ worked with us on a lot of our marketing materials, and this was something that they worked up for us in the conversation related to good news, bad news. The bad news being maybe the store folks or their employees might be part of the problem. And you all recall all the conversations related to meter feeding, and that was kind of what we were alluding to there. This one went out to residential folks, about 900 addresses in our residential permit parking districts. And so that one went out. Then this is one of the things that I was probably most proud of, was that warning period where we did the ticket that was just a warning if it was the first time. And what a lot of people thought is we were doing all warning tickets for a period of time, but even that first week of doing tickets, people were starting to get real tickets. So our electronic database would show if you've received a warning or not. So everybody's first one was a warning, and then after that it was a real ticket. We worked up this map that for the first time, this was back in July, for the first time you had on-street and off-street information on one map, some of the information related to garage rates and the parking program. And I'm sorry for the quality of this, but this is the newest one that you all have in front of you. And I've got, it's a four-fold brochure, and this is the map side of it. And then the other side still has information related to garage rates. I've got some others in the back if anybody here wants to pick them up. And it folds up. The one you all have is the flat version. And the main difference here is where we started to show where the new solar-powered stations are in the core of downtown. And then where you see the red line that says 1 hour meter, and then the blue line indicates 2 hour meters. On the prior map, almost all of downtown were 1 hour meters, and you'll recall we changed all those to 2 hour meters, except for a small strip of meters on Short Street where the clock shop and a barber shop, that area right there, they requested that we stay to 1 hour. And I only bring that out just to mention that we do try to adapt to what that local need is by the merchants. These were in the Chevy Chaser and the Business Lexington, and then during the month of July, we ran these types in the Herald Leader for probably about every third day in different sections of the Herald Leader, just to get the word out about what was going on. Some of the achievements I've just noted, but in July we've got, we opened up the storefront office, the Lex Park office that's down on 114 North Upper. We began the on-street management. We're actually writing tickets on the 7th of July, and then implemented that first-time warning program for first offenders. In August, we started overseeing the neighborhood programs and enforcing the permits in the neighborhoods, and then rolled out that amnesty program. And we installed 50 new single-space meters in September and began to convert all those 1 hour meters to 2 hour meters, and that happened during the month of October. Except for the 3 that are on Short Street. And then beginning in October, we began the installation of the pay and display meters that are solar powered. 5 of them actually were installed by the 15th of October. We began a citation noticing, and I'll stop just for a second on this one. Something that our electronic database is able to accomplish is also going out and getting DMV records outside the Fayette County and outside the state. The government in the past never sent a letter to anyone outside of Fayette County to collect on an outstanding citation, and we are starting to see those payments coming in during the month of December from that work in November, and this will continue. And then we began installing we had the booting program that was rolled out in November, where if you have 3 or more unpaid citations, you could be booted. Then the last 25 meters were installed in January, and we're continuing that, rolling them out right now. And then probably one of the things I'm now the most excited about is the new Smart Card program. Just went out and purchased mine today, but this is going to be really great for delivery people, runners from law firms. You can get this debit card that works in single-space meters and the new multi-space meters, and you can load it up and then reload it as you use it up. Then, obviously, the meter rate increase that's going on right now during the conversion process. I won't spend too much time here on the green initiative, but the last bullet point that is very important when you combine both consistent enforcement and this rate increase. Our goal is to get an 85% occupancy in any of the areas that have meters, which would mean 15% empty, which would mean typically on a block you ought to have a parking space or two available, which was not the case before we took over. And when you think about the emissions and intersection accidents that happen just from people cruising and getting frustrated looking for parking, that's a part of green that you may not think of. Then our emphasis on technology, obviously those electric chariots that the 5 Outriders are riding, new electronic ticket writers. The police have always over the years used a handwritten pad to write the citations on. And then photo enforcement, the citation ticket writers that we've purchased also can take a photo. So if we're saying that someone's parked at a hydrant or over a yellow line and they want to argue that, we have a record of what happened. And then online payments, I think is a great technology. Never before has the Urban County government been able to collect revenue from a parking citation online. We're seeing payments made, on the weekends when offices aren't open now. Then replacing the old mechanical meters, which over half of all the meters in the inventory the Urban County government had were these old mechanical meters you can't get parts for, you can't change the rates, you can't audit them, and then rolling out the pay and display meters. So I'll slow down just a bit on this, because I think this is the topic of the day, and then I have some statistics right after these next 2 slides. There are 50 pay and display meters that are solar powered. When all is said and done, we expect to have about 1,300 paid spaces in the inventory. These 50 will take about 400, will function in about 450 of those, so there'll still be around 800 or so single space meters when we're all said and done, which still have to be upgraded to accept the smart card and the rate changes. They're in what you might call 3 areas. The core of downtown has about 29 of them. The UK area has about 17, and then we propose 4 in the Chevy Chase area. And when we roll it out on a block that, when it first gets powered up and we're in use, we've adopted the warning program again. We're going to go for 30 days, give people a warning instead of a ticket so that they can get used to how that works without, being impacted with a $15 citation. And the features are one of the great things, and I think it's something that most of the merchants have appreciated, is that you don't have to carry around a pocket full of quarters anymore, that you can pay with cash, coin if you wish, and then credit cards, debit cards, and we're going to roll out a cell phone payment program in a few months. We'll be talking about that later. And it provides you a receipt. A lot of times we make a mistake if we write a ticket. If you've got that receipt, you can get that ticket voided right away with that. These functions with a wireless communication system where they can report back if they need paper, if there's issues with it. They even can report if somebody's kicking on them or hitting them with a hammer. And then there's a merchant validation program that I spoke with Mr. Farmer about as well, and he thought it was pretty interesting. The receipt that comes out, it's a 2-part receipt. You can tear off the bottom half of it, and if a merchant wanted to say, we'll cover your parking, they can leave the top part on the dash and bring in this bottom part and show the merchant that they've paid to park, and they could establish this in any way they want. They could give them the money for it. They could give them $1 off for if you spend a certain amount of money. I think that's a pretty neat thing, because in the past, if you put a quarter in a meter, you really didn't have any proof to show of it. There are disadvantages of these, and I think one of the things, and I totally agree with Mr. Farmer on this, having to walk to the meter, pay, go back to your car and display it, and then go on about your business. It is a few extra steps, and that is definitely one of the disadvantages. We think that the advantages far outweigh, and I won't go through all of them, but you can see there's quite a few on both sides, but obviously we wouldn't have purchased them if we didn't feel the advantages were going to outweigh the disadvantages. Just a few statistics real quick. When we took over, there was around 1,200 metered spaces. We've added about 68. And in those spaces, there's 50 pay and display meters. We monitor 28 different parking or neighborhood parking zones. We sold about 905 permits this past year. During the warning time frame, we issued 9,952 warnings, which equated to about $147,000 worth of citations that were completely free, in an effort to really provide goodwill and to explain to people how the program works. Currently, the citations that we've written, there's 16,000 of them outstanding. There's 12,000 or so that's been paid, and total revenue to date in the past 6 months is $278,000. This is just a 6 months look here, 6 months prior to Lex Park taking over, and then the past 6 months would take you up to the end of December. So this is before any meter rate increase came into play. So you can see just up on the top line where meter revenue is, just by enhanced enforcement, getting the word out, getting the information out, It's nearly doubled just in that effort, not quite. Citation revenues were the big, I guess, bang, so to speak, has happened, and that is because of all the noticing, the sending out letter, and letting people know if you don't pay, you could receive a wheel lock. And so we've collected that much to date, $188,000, and then total revenue, it's gone from $94,000 to $278,000 again in the past 6 months. We would anticipate the citation revenue to continue to trend upward, and obviously the meter revenue at some point. Even though you can say going from a quarter to $1 is quadrupling, we don't expect that because there will be some of a thinning. But for the rest of this fiscal year, we would anticipate the meter revenue to climb. Just a reminder about the rates. There's different rates that we deal with. There's the citations, which this council in 2000, the citation penalty for any kind of parking violation was $4 and went to $15 back in 2000. Residential permit program, which has been in place since 1990, those are $10 a piece. That hasn't changed. Don't plan on changing it. The meter rates, again, went from a quarter to $1 this month. We're still working on that process, and the council back in 1983 was the last time it was raised, went from a nickel to 25 cents. So I like to say that was a 500% increase. We only did 400%. Just for public information, we'd just like to throw these things out. Some people are a little bit confused because the word authority sounds maybe bigger than it might be, and so we just want to remind people what Lexpark does not do. And we're not in charge of any private parking lots, and nothing that's non-governmental. We do not write citations for parking in yards, and we don't have any control of any other parking entities in town. And that doesn't mean that we're saying that any of these are good or bad. We just don't have anything to do with that. And so some people are a bit confused that we might be in charge of them or be able to dictate to them, and we can't. Any questions?
Council members, we'll take questions, and then we'll hear from Mr. Farmer. Councilmember Blues.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Means, thanks so much, and you've certainly done an amazing amount of work in the time that you've been engaged in this transition. I do have and have heard some concerns expressed, so I would like to pass them on to you, and maybe you could comment on them. These few come from a downtown business owner who reported that one, the new setup is unsightly with all of these old poles, plus the solar tower, and am I right that the individual poles where the pay and display towers are, that they will be removed in due course?
Yes, it's such a major project that we've taken on with just the conversion process along with the smart cards. You know, we're going to each and every meter and updating them. This is sort of what an updated version. The old meters don't have the slot, and we have to reprogram them and you know, take them apart, put them back together. But the answer is our goal is to remove all of those posts to get rid of the clutter. I would anticipate, along with the streetscape plan, that especially Main and Vine and the Lime corridor that we hope to get done before the 2010 games, we would work along with that construction to remove them. But as we can get to that project, that's kind of the next goal, to take those away and remove the clutter. But one of the things that we found in our original goal, if you took a block face, we were going to put a sign at either end of the block and then the meter in the middle. We found that if you park in the middle there, some people are feeling like they don't see enough indication that they need to pay. So it may be that we need to leave a couple of those and add some smaller signage to those posts. But our goal is to get rid of that clutter.
I see. Thank you. I also this person complained that it's even more convenient now to stop for 2 minutes to pick up a sandwich somewhere, and for just stopping for a couple couple of minutes to do that, and I wonder if the smart card would help that kind of issue.
It could. I think probably what they're getting at is if they just wanted to run right in real quick, they've now got to park over to the solar pay station and go back to their dash and then go in. And again, that could be a bit of an inconvenience, but we're only going to put these in, again, there's 50 of them, about 450 of the 1,300 spaces at this point is where these are going. So there's probably a block just before it or just after it where they could go to the single space if they felt like it was just more convenient to stick a quarter in and run and come back to their vehicle. There's still those options.
With regard to the pay and display system, how do folks in other, in other cities get along with this? My only experience in where this is widely used was that everybody took it as a matter of course, but you would probably know more about that than I would.
To relate it to a non-parking scenario, it's kind of like when the bank started rolling out ATM machines. We were all a little uncomfortable with that at first, and I want to tell her, but we got used to it. And a lot of times it's a lot faster and easier and more convenient just to go straight to an ATM. It's similar to that in the parking. It's kind of a little bump to get over with the technology. But I'm speaking directly with a few different cities, and actually as I'm working with Mr. Farmer and the Chevy Chase folks, I found out about a historic district in the city of Houston. Houston rolled out 750s of these same exact meters that and there was a historic district that didn't appreciate the solar panel and requested that they didn't mind the meter so much because of its lower profile, but they felt like the solar panel took away from some of the historic value. And basically the parking operation there worked with them. That historic district paid for wiring, which we haven't planned on that expense because you have to do a lot of underground to get the power to the units. But that was their way of resolving it. But that was the only complaint. And I was really specific in my question to them, if they had specific merchant-type neighborhoods that had issues, and they didn't have anything really to speak of other than that historic issue with the solar panel itself.
I'm sorry, are all of ours now solar powered?
There's 50
that are solar powered.
Yeah, any of the meters that are going to be more than a single space, all those 50 are going to be solar powered at this point.
Okay. One other complaint I had, I might as well get them all
No
to
problem.
you. And that is that on one occasion the machine was not working, and this person called the parking authority and was told not to worry about that the weather was too cold for it to work. If that's the case, will that be a continuing problem, or is that just a glitch that can be?
We're hoping it's a glitch with the latest of the 25. There's been some problems with that, and we think related to the cold. So we're working with the manufacturer on that to make sure we can get over that glitch. But I think it's something related to just them being new and us working through the bugs.
Okay.
We're not going to leave it that way.
I see. Good. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Stinnett.
Thank you, Chair. Gary, thank you for coming today. We really appreciate you coming on such short notice. A couple things. One, when you did the research for these new solar panels, where did you look for to get the background and who else is using? What other cities are currently using those meters?
We actually we researched other cities and met with the vendors, and I've been to a few different trade shows and spoke with them and got the ideas of different cities. That whole technology was more of a European thing at first and has made its way into the U.S. and even in Canada, which, again, they've figured out a way to get past the cold issue, so I'm sure we'll be able to as well. But as it started migrating into the U.S., you found it more in the bigger cities, Portland and Seattle and on that coast, and then obviously Miami has a bunch of them, and Houston, as I've spoken with. I just found out Pittsburgh, even though Pittsburgh it's still got a pretty tight downtown, and they've rolled out some of these. And then back in December, over a year ago, we invited 4 or 5 different vendors here, and they came to town, and we invited everybody to come view them and let them kind of give us an educational presentation. We weren't at that point at an RFP point, but we just wanted to get, and so we learned a little bit about bill acceptors versus not, and do you give change and do you not give change. So we've spent some time on this, well over a year, and again, put out an RFP and allowed all the vendors to respond. And then, again, as you go through that, you get ideas about signage. And even if you're not going to use this vendor, you learn a lot each time. So I think we went through a pretty extensive process as far as doing the research.
So, and during your research, how do other cities deal with out-of-town people or people that are coming for like a UK game that aren't familiar with the new system? How do you, I know you briefly mentioned under Councilmember Blues' question, are you going to put more signage along the street? I mean, how are we going to let people know that, hey, you got to go to the central spot, this is not a free spot?
And again, I think that's one thing that we've realized, that just having the sign on either end leaves a little room for someone to miss out on the message. So we think adding the additional signage, most people that travel and they go into a downtown are typically looking around, because most downtowns charge to park. So it's, they just need to figure out if there's not a meter right here, there must be something somewhere. I think that's typical of a traveler, but we don't want to make it a mystery. And at the same time, I think if somebody really has a legitimate issue with either something malfunctioning or they didn't understand it, we can void if we need to go that route.
Do we have any free parking spaces downtown along streets? I mean, there are still several left, aren't there?
There's these secret hiding spaces that people find, but if there's an area that the demand is great enough, there's typically been a meter put in. There are some areas, there's still some curb line, but it really doesn't do any good to the function of it. Even if you told somebody about it, if they drove over there, it would already be taken up because people found out where those are, and they'll stay there all day.
And that's where you found your 68 new spaces?
There's some areas that were just some curb line that folks were parking on, and we found that probably made sense to add some paid parking in those locations. And I don't anticipate a lot of growth beyond that. And we kind of have a controlled environment as far as, the expansion. Maybe Manchester one day is as booming as we hope it might be. There may be paid parking there someday. But for right now, I think, 5 or 10 here or there might be the total growth.
And then on the map that you handed out, that you gave us, I assume it looks like 99% of our spaces are 2-hour meters now.
Yes.
And,
before we did that, I anticipated, even as a downtown user, I knew if you go to a 1-hour meeting, you need about an hour and a half to get there, pay, and go to your meeting and get back. So we had anticipated rolling it out and changing it as needed, but it was a little bit surprising that everybody, especially in the Chevy Chase area, we raced very quickly to swap theirs out because we realized that there was a real negative impact and changed those to 2-hour. The merchants that I mentioned earlier, there's 3 meters still on Short Street, and they wanted them to stay because of that type of turnover. And a lot of times in cities next to, say, a 1-hour photo or a copies place where you maybe just run in and pick up a blueprint or something, sometimes they'll want less than even an hour. And we'll try to adjust that when we feel like the need is there.
And Chevy Chase is 2 hours?
It's 2 hours now. It was, most all of them were 1 hour before.
And I saw on one of your slides that now you're giving a warning right now on these, the new solar panels.
So where we stopped the warning period at the end of September, we've started it back up again when these come online for 30 days after they come online to help educate.
Okay, and then anything after 5 o'clock obviously is free still?
Exactly.
That's not changed?
And it used to be 6. We changed it to 5 to try to enhance the nightlife, Monday through Friday after 5 and all the weekends, Saturday and Sundays.
And any citations that your folks write, where does that revenue go back to?
The citation revenue will go to support the program or any other new improvements or capital improvements. Currently, meter revenue after expenses is dedicated to pay off the bond that Urban County government makes about a $700-and-something thousand payment every year for garage bonds.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that distinction, that citation actually goes all back to you.
Right.
And not that you have an incentive to write more of them, but you do capture that revenue back for capital improvements.
Exactly. We don't have an incentive to write more, but we certainly are incentivized to try to get them paid.
And that is definitely a difficult task to do sometimes, I know.
Exactly.
And I appreciate all your work you've done on the Parking Authority. I know it was difficult when we decided to create it, and we talked about it a long time here on council, and it looks like though it's headed in the right direction. Maybe a few tweaks here and there, but it looks like we're heading in the right direction. Thank you.
I appreciate that, but I want to say I've received a lot of thanks, and I am not a one-man show. I've had a lot of help. The Urban County government employees have just been incredible, which I was not associated with the government prior to taking this position and kind of had an anticipation of maybe some pushback, but all of the agencies within the government have just been incredibly helpful in what we do. And then again, the Lex Park team are bringing all kinds of great ideas to what we're doing, so certainly I can't take the credit.
I did have one last question. So any alternatives besides the solar panels and a normal parking meter? Is there anything in between, any compromises? Or systems that you've seen around the country that may work better for like a Chevy Chase?
Right.
Or?
Not necessarily in between. The other enhancement that we feel like rolling out is a cell phone opportunity to pay by cell phone, and that's just, it would work with either system, but it probably wouldn't be a blend of the two. You're still paying to park.
Right now, we just have the two options, either put a meter by the cars or the central location. Okay, very good, thank you.
Councilmember Crosby?
Thank you. I am going to, as Councilmember Blues, make you aware of a few situations that have been brought to my attention, and then also I have a few questions. And I kind of like to paint a picture, and if you could just imagine a mom, you know, I think when you were listing the benefits and saying that the benefits far outweigh, you know, the negatives of this, picture a mom, one much like myself, in fact it was myself, with 6 kids in her car on a field trip, and I was very excited because I found a parking spot on the street, and I had these 6 kids who were very excited to be going on a field trip to the Opera House. And I got out of my car, and it was a beautiful, snowy, sleety day in Lexington, Kentucky, and I got out and I was trying to find the parking, the little solar, you know, parking thing, and I had to cross the street. I couldn't leave them in the car by themselves because that's against the law, so I could have been arrested, as they would have said, you know, the mommy will get thrown in jail if you do that. So I had to haul all 6 kids out of the car with me in the snowy, sleety weather, across one street trying to find a little parking thing to stick my money into, and we went down about half a block. I couldn't find it, so then I turned around and we all went the other way down the block, and finally we found one and realized that I didn't have a credit card or anything on me, so I was trying to get my dollar bills all straightened out, and at this time they're running around in the puddles, in the snow, throwing snowballs, and they were soaking wet, and I'm finally getting the thing. I had to then go back all the way to the car, get it in. It slides down the front end of my car. So then I'm digging it out from the dashboard, trying to fish it out so that I don't get a ticket, because I've now purchased it as the kids are running around the street of Lexington, trying to get it out so I don't get a ticket, get it on the front of the car. Finally, we go to the Opera House. They're soaking wet. I'm soaking wet. And I'm a perfectly able-bodied person. The kids are perfectly able-bodied, but it was a very frustrating situation because, one, I didn't know where to find where I was going, and two, I was having to, get my money out just right. And so, again, I see the benefits, but that was a very frustrating day for someone like myself. The other problem that has been brought to my attention is that the machines sometimes run out of tape. And I've been told that even when that's been brought to the attention of the people, that there are cars that aren't able to go up and get the tickets, and they're still being ticketed even though they put their money in and they can't get the ticket. Have you heard situations like that?
I've heard a couple of receipt issues, and if they didn't communicate to the people not to write the tickets, we certainly would void a ticket, because they know when the machines are down. They get messages from the machine. As far as it running out of paper, I'm not really sure if that's been the case, because they've only been up and running as a pretty good sized roll, but it could have happened. We've also found that people haven't realized that the receipt was, they think that it's going to come out like some machines work, and it's down in the little cup down there, and people have walked off and left receipts there that didn't realize it was right there for them.
And also just the fact, like I mentioned too, that they are so small and that they do slide down the fronts. I've had several people say that they have literally lost them down the front. They've had to go back again to get another one because you can't always fish them out, evidently. So they've had to go back, get another ticket, pay the extra money just to park for the 2 hours. So those are a couple issues that have come up. One question I have too is, how do you determine who gets a single meter space? I know Dr. Blues touched on it a little bit, but could you just clarify, because I know a few of us up here were kind of confused. If you could clarify your
Basically,
answer.
there's two different criteria. One would be, we were looking for around 9 or 10 parking meters in a row to make this investment. In some cases in downtown, you're going to see it at where there may be 4 or 5, but typically we were looking for 9 or 10. So that's one criteria. The other would be, after our enforcement was rolled out, if more than 50% of those meters in that area were occupied, we felt like there was enough demand to utilize this new meter. If it was less than 50%, then we didn't opt to go to that new meter.
Thank you.
Councilmember James.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Gary. Thank you so much. You've been really helpful through this whole transition with parking, and you've met with neighborhoods with me, and appreciate everything that you've done, and it's definitely showing that there's change happening in downtown Lexington. A couple of questions I had. Going back to one thing Councilmember Crosby mentioned, when I first utilized the machine, I thought that you'd be able to enter your space number, and then the machine itself would read out that you were paid up or not. Is it equipped to be able to do that so that you don't have to have the little printed ticket?
These meters can be programmed that way, but what we were trying to accomplish along with Streetscape plan is to lessen the clutter. And what we'd have to do is mark every space number and leave the post with a sign of the space number, so we'd actually be adding to clutter as opposed to, but that's called pay by space. We went with pay and display. The one benefit that we now have is that you've got proof of your payment, but that pay by space, it can work. It can work with this type of meter, but again, we'd have to mark every single space in the whole inventory that we're doing with both a sign up and then something down on the ground so that they would know exactly what space.
So it is required that it's required that it be posted up on something, and not, it couldn't just be a spot painted on a curb or something like that.
Because of snow, then and other, just it wearing off and that kind of thing, it's good to have two ways to inform folks.
Okay. Okay, that answers that. What about when the machines go down, who does the maintenance on the machines?
The Lex Park team, which is made up of, besides their supervisors and management, there's the 5 outriders, and then there's 2 maintenance individuals and the supervisor. So if a call goes into the Lex Park office on North Upper, they would notify one of the maintenance people to go out to this location, whatever it would be, to correct it. And at the same time, if we hear something like it's not working, they should also notify the outrider in that area not to write citations because it's down until we get it fixed.
Okay.
That's the
So how often, since July, has the main manufacturer had to come to fix something as opposed to just our maintenance folks?
Well, we haven't. The new meters have only been in since mid-October, and there was
Okay.
only 5 then, and then it was late November when the next 20 went in, so we don't have a lot of track record yet on the
Okay.
newer ones. On the older ones, we've been able to fix problems with parts or replacement. The mechanism inside this style of a meter can just be replaced, and we've been able to do that in-house, and much faster than it used to happen when LFUCG was taking care of those meters. You'd see a meter down for 2-3 days a lot in the past.
So the being cold issue, that's a manufacturer deal. That's something they need to work on.
Exactly.
What are they doing right now to help resolve that?
I just found out about it last week, and I was out of town, so I don't know what all the communications are yet on that, but I've certainly pushed some pretty serious emails to the manufacturer to make sure we get on it. So I'm not sure what their resolution will be.
Oh, do you know what the length of that, as far as, are they under contract to continue to fix those as
Yes.
problems arise?
A warranty issue at this point for the first
What's
year.
the warranty?
1 year.
1 year only? From which date?
The date of installation, and they'll track each of these have their own serial number. So some of them started in October, some in November, and then the rest in January. So basically, up through this calendar year, we would have warranty on these.
Okay. So as we get closer to that, if you, being an authority, I'm not really sure how that works, but if you see that there's a problem with the very first ones that were put in, and like say cold weather is about to hopefully not be around too long. So how is it that by the time cold weather starts again, if those issues aren't resolved, will we be stuck with malfunctioning machines
I'm not
without
gonna,
warranty?
I wouldn't live with that. Now, we'll make sure it's right. I mean,
Okay.
I don't want to, be listening to the problems of cold weather. We're going to get it fixed, and I'm working on that real strongly now.
Okay. And is there such thing as sleep mode on the machines? I was having lunch with someone downtown, and they said I couldn't put any money in because the machine was on sleep mode. What does that mean?
That's not exactly the way I understand that it would work, but sleep mode is kind of like with our desktop, just to be an energy saver, and with them being solar paneled, it's almost like they'll go into sleep mode, so if no one's touched the machine for a while, it'll sort of go into a power down state to save power and allow the solar to continue. So when you hit a button, you've got to wait a little bit. I was just checking one of the new ones on Limestone, and if you think it's broke, then you typically won't wait long enough. But there's a few seconds before it'll boot up, so to speak. But
And so
I
as
don't
a
think that it wouldn't have accepted money. I'm just not sure what might have. There could have been another issue maybe, because if you tried right away, it may not. But it's just a few seconds before it'll come alive.
Okay. What are you supposed to do as a motorist? If you go to a machine and it's either broken, sleep mode, and you can't get it to respond, are you supposed to put a note somewhere in your car, or just go on and go about your business? Or
I
what are you supposed to
I
do?
would call the Lex Park office or leave a note, one or the other. But I think calling the office is the fastest way to get the proper.
Is that what it says on? It says that on machine, doesn't it?
believe
If
so.
you
I
have
believe it's got
problems
their
to
phone
call.
number.
Okay. And what are the hours that the meters are for? I know, did the hours change a little bit from previous?
Well, we backed off from the 6 p.m. All meters used to be 8 to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and now these and the old single space are 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, and that's it.
Okay. What about holidays?
Well, we've run into some issues with communication on holidays, and our board just adopted that we will follow the LFUCG observed holidays, and we've got that now on our website, and we'll continue to try to get that word out.
And so what does that mean for folks that are watching?
Well, that would mean it's free parking on one of the days that was controversial is the Friday after Thanksgiving.
Yes.
I mean, everybody would expect Thanksgiving, and some did the Friday after, so we're going to implement that. But again, that'll only be if all of the development in downtown that we all hope for creates a lot of great merchant activity. That Friday after Thanksgiving could become a booming day, and we may need to revisit it. But at this point, there's not enough to warrant the enforcement. And since so many people think that it's a holiday, we've decided to not. So not enforce it. So that would mean the meters are free. But you could still get parking tickets for parking, fire hydrants, or loading zones, things that you shouldn't be doing. But any of the meters would be free on holidays.
Okay. And garage is owned by government as well, that would be free?
I can't speak to the garages at this point.
And let's see, on the mechanical meters that you've removed, the older ones, what did we do with those?
We have another city that has wanted to purchase a few of them. We've got scrap collectors that are asking about it, and so I have to work with Brian Markham and Surplus and Purchasing to work out what we're going to do. And there's even some talk of maybe some public art with the old meter. So
Okay.
we might see
I was going to say
something come out of it.
some cities have done it for fundraisers, like just have different nonprofits be able to put them in different locations. So I'd be happy to
There's
talk
600 or
with you about that
700
too.
of them, and we'd be open to ideas because
Okay.
it's a lot of weight right now.
One of the complaints that I've heard from people like Councilmember Crosby, moms that have carrying babies and want to swipe their card and things like that, is could there be any type of canopy attachment for inclement weather, pouring rain, and you're waiting on something to print out, and someone reported that it took 15 minutes for them to get something to actually print out when they paid with a credit card. So I'm just wondering if there's a canopy attachment that could potentially be purchased.
I really like that idea, other than the solar power would be blocked by.
Well, it could go under.
If we can figure out a way to do that, I'd certainly entertain the idea. And then again, 15 minutes is way too long. We need to make sure that the equipment's working better than that. And then something to Councilmember Crosby's comments, and any mom, the cell phone plan may be a good thing for those folks. What you'll be able to do is just pull into the parking space, and you'll have to have set up an account. You can dial in and say, I'm at meter number whatever, and you can pay for an hour or ever how long you want right from your car, and then just walk off and do the business.
Okay. And are you, I'm sure you are, but logging the complaints that you're hearing from citizens and finding ways to respond to those?
Yes.
Is there, on the website, I haven't checked out your website lately, but do you have those kind of listed? If folks are, if everyone's, if you're hearing a lot of things like, can there be a canopy, or what if the machine is in sleep mode, what should I do? Can you have kind of a question frequently asked questions, responses there?
There is something very similar to that
Okay.
about reporting a broken meter and some question and answers. And you can also, when you're at the website, if you have any questions, it allows you to send an email directly. And all emails that go to info@lexpark.org, I get a copy on all of those. So
Okay.
I'm helping respond to those if the office doesn't clarify it as well as I would like them to.
Sure. And for those watching, what's your website address?
It's lexpark.org.
lexpark.org. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Beard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Chairperson. Close. Gary, I may have already gotten this answer with the comments that have been made previously about disabled machines in one form or another, and the complaints I've had two of them actually, perceive that it's the lack of sunlight that they're inoperable for whatever reason, and didn't mention the cold weather or didn't mention anything else but sunlight. Is the lack of sunlight we have from November 15th till April 1st around here, is that a problem?
It has become an issue, and what we've done is purchased additional batteries. There are a few meters, depending on where, apparently, and I'm learning a little bit about solar panels, but they should be directed towards the south. And there are some areas that just don't get, because of a building or something that's
Right.
nearby. And so we kind of know which one those are and work through those bugs. So we've purchased extra batteries and keep them on charge. They can check every morning. It's just like on your cell phone. There's kind of, you can look at all of the meters and see how many bars are left basically on the battery. And if it's getting into a critical scenario, they can take a battery out. And batteries, even with no sunlight, they'll go 3 or 4 days without fully trickling.
Well, the only other question I had were the hours, and I think it's been asked twice and answered twice, so I don't need it.
I'll be glad to answer it again.
No, that's fine. I got it the second time. I didn't quite get it the first time. Thank you very much.
All right.
Councilmember Feigl.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Means, for coming at our request to make this presentation. And I will tell you that this is the first presentation that I've heard since I'm a new council member, and I'm trying to get up to speed. But did I understand you to say that some of the old meters will remain?
Well, there's when you're talking about the old meters, there's two different meters that we're talking about. There are a group of them out there that are around 20-something years old. Some of them went in, and when that rate increase occurred in '83, they had to put in new meters. And so there's a group of those that we'll call mechanical. You actually have to wind them up, and there's a lot of them still out there. Then there's a group of them that were similar to this, but there was a cover over where the smart card slot is. There was a plate there. Those had to be upgraded to accept the smart card, and then the rate change is getting programmed into those as we go. So when we've purchased the larger meters, if they were on a block where there were electronic meters available, we're taking those from that and using them in areas where the old mechanical. So we're trying to kind of, I guess, rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, to save on, instead of just saying we need 800 new meters like this, we're taking the ones like this from where solar power went and moving them to other locations.
Okay, I guess I should have worded my question a little differently. There will be meters, individual meters for individual parking places in some areas.
Yes, always, continually.
Individual meters.
Yes.
And will they be coin-fed meters?
Yes, the ones that will be left will look just like this. It has a coin slot on the side and then the card slot. The drawback to these, as opposed to some of the complaints that have come up with the other ones, is that this only accepts 2 forms of payment, and you're going to have to go to the Lex Park office to purchase the card that I showed you earlier, the smart card. So with the rate increase, these are going to require quarters or that smart card, whereas the solar powered has all the other options.
We'll take quarters?
Yes.
Okay. And are there some meters that where you can park for less than 2 hours?
There are 3, to my knowledge, that is going to be all that's left in the inventory. There are 3 meters left at 1 hour on Short Street between Upper and Limestone, where there's a clock shop and a barber shop. There are some 4-hour meters in a few strategic locations where maybe longer-term parking is more beneficial. We've got some out in the UK area and some in some of the outskirting areas of downtown.
Okay, so were those 1-hour meters placed in those in those specific areas to accommodate the kind of business that was there?
Yes, and years back, when I first started paying attention to this, maybe back in '99 or so, there were still some 10-hour meters, and I believe we've had 24-minute meters in downtown, like in front of a copy place. I think there used to be one in front of, on Main Street,
Okay.
near
well,
near the government center here. There used to be a couple of them, I believe.
My primary interest is the Chevy Chase area that is within my district. And so I'm just trying to ask as many questions as I can to see if there's some way that we can accommodate those businesses. And I will be very anxious to hear Mr. Farmer's comments. So hopefully we've answered all the questions.
I have a slide, if you would like to look at the Chevy Chase area, to might get everybody's kind of arms around that area and where the meters are, if you'd like to look at that. This is Euclid coming diagonally through, and then High Street coming around. So if you can, and then South Ashland has, in the whole area, there's about 68 meters there. Great. Okay, so we got Euclid coming through here, and then this is High Street, Starbucks right about there, and Mr. Farmer's store is probably right in here somewhere. The furthest. What we would do is these circles indicate where we have installed the 4 pay and display. We have identified South Ashland as an area that's underutilized, and even this area right here by far underutilized. So this is a strip that we had said we feel like it's best to only go to 50 cents there. All of these meters were going to $1. These meters right up here would probably be too far to walk, so we'll leave this. Our plan was to leave single heads here, and then there's 4 just off the map down here. Help me out. That's across from the Chevy Chase Plaza.
Right.
Yeah, there's 4 down there. And all of these meters were the old wind-up meters, and when we heard the initial complaints about the 1-hour issue, we scrambled and brought over some electronic meters, but those are really dedicated to go somewhere else because we have 10 here, across from Farmer's Jewelry, I think 8 here and 9 here. All of those meters are dedicated to go somewhere else. They're electronic meters that we had planned for them to be somewhere else because we wouldn't need them here. So part of what Chevy Chase is asking us to do is if we remove these 4, then we have to remount them, relocate them, find another location that makes sense. And then we're going to have to purchase I think it's about 38 individual meters like these at the cost of maybe $13,000 that's unplanned. Again, we're open to, and Mr. Farmer and I are working on a meeting, and I'm very open to listening to everybody and not saying this is how it's going to be. But a couple of the issues that they have to keep in mind is where they're concerned about a few extra steps, they're actually asking their customers to carry a pocket full of quarters if we leave the single meters there, and then they're also asking us to spend about $13,000 of unplanned money to put the upgraded old-style meter at those locations.
And did I understand that prior to implementing this new parking system, that the merchants in the Chevy Chase area had not been contacted, that they had not actually been given an opportunity for input?
That is correct. There hasn't been a direct. I have spoken to the Merchants Association group here in downtown that they have always been invited to several times. We've tried to put out the word as much as possible, but we didn't directly contact them. We have found that for the most part, people have said, "Oh, this is great because now my customers can use a dollar bill." So we didn't anticipate this type of sort of negative impression of the system, or else we would have. And obviously, we're holding up for a little bit and trying to make that happen as far as the communication goes now.
And I'm glad to see that you're doing that, because we were presented a petition with most of the businesses, if not all the businesses in Chevy Chase, signing onto the petition. So this goes beyond just, Mr. Farmer's business as well.
Sure.
And I would just ask that, have you met with those businesses since this has come up, since this?
No, and again, I was out of town last week, and we are scrambling to get this meeting put together. Mr. Farmer and I were just talking earlier today, so we're trying to get one hopefully in the next week. and be able to make that announcement and get everybody together, and
Okay,
I will go
and-
in and talk with them and listen to
And
their
I would like to
concerns.
be invited to that meeting as well.
Well, of course,
Thank you very much.
no problem.
Councilmember Henson.
Thank you, Chair. Gary, I just got a few questions. I want to clarify, if I park at a 2-hour meter, I can still pay for 15 minutes? Is that correct? Or
That's a great point. The rate is $1 per hour, but you could still put a quarter in for 15 minutes
okay.
and run.
So if I want to run in, pick something up,
Yes, on either type of machine that we've been talking about, you can pay for smaller increments.
okay. And the other thing, it was my understanding that after hours, like after 6 p.m., nights, weekends, holidays, are free parking downtown.
Exactly. And I'll explain something when I answer that question. It's free after 5, but we would react to a request should the nightlife get so busy and merchants say, Gary, you got to help me out. All the waitresses are lined up and none of my customers can come park at my restaurant. It's very common in cities that have healthy downtowns, and some of them that our Chamber of Commerce trips have gone to have meters that go until 9 p.m., that kind of thing. Certainly nothing that I propose soon. Don't really want to have to be in charge of things that are going on at 9. But if it's a demand issue and the merchants want it, we would certainly react to that.
Well, and then the last thing was, you have the accessible parking, on-street parking, but each of the garages and the surface lots also have accessible.
I can't speak to all of the surface lots. There's a lot of older lots in town that if they wanted to make a change, they'd have to go before planning and get a plan approved that would force them to do an ADA requirement. But definitely all of the Urban County government garages comply and even over comply, and some, the annex garage has more than its need. And there aren't any federal mandates for on-street parking, but in a survey, we actually meet what would be an off-street requirement. Per how many on-street meters there are, we have as many ADA spaces as required as a city.
Well, I appreciate everything you've done. I think you've been very innovative, very cooperative, working with the community, and I'm glad, and I know that as problems arise, that you will do everything you can to compromise on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Crosby.
I just have a follow-up based on the slides you showed of the Chevy Chase area. How do you determine an underutilized parking area?
That would go back to that 50%, survey that we did when we went out and looked. If you'll go out in the Chevy Chase area prior to these meters going into place, and we were looking at where they would go, we did surveys at 10, noon, and 2. At 10 and 2, in the areas where we put the 4, there's always spaces, but during the noon hour with Buddy's and a lot of very successful restaurants in that area, all of them were full. So it just made sense. You had 9 or 10 in a row, you had full meters. And I believe that a lot of the clientele that are coming in that area are used to technology and would adapt to it. So that was some of the reasoning that we went with. But when you looked at South Ashland, I never really saw that type of occupancy. And I felt like it doesn't make sense to put a different kind of impact on them when they don't have the occupancy to begin
So,
with.
for example, you wouldn't take into consideration that there might be a new business that comes in on South Ashland, like a new restaurant that's just come in and it may have been underutilized at the time, but now there's a new business that exists there. And again, as a mom, I can't get in the soccer center over there. First, I can't find parking there during the day hardly at one of those parking meters. And quite frankly, I cannot get in and out of there in an hour with 3 kids buying soccer shoes, shin guards, and socks. And I mean,
Sure.
that would be it's impossible. So I don't know where some of this data comes from, but again, that is impossible to get in and out of there, and to find parking is very difficult over there.
And we changed all the 1 hour to 2 hour in that whole area to help with that scenario. And we're hoping that between the enforcement and the new rate that you would be able to find parking anytime you go into that area and have 2 hours to do whatever you need to do.
Thank you.
Do other council members have questions? I have a quick question.
Okay.
in Seattle, and this goes back to Councilmember Blue's and Councilmember Crosby's concern about the receipt falling down the front. In Seattle, they use a Post-it note type receipt, and you just put it inside on the front window where the chariot person can drive by and see it. Did you consider that sort of a receipt system?
I have heard of that. I think one of the things that we can, it may sound like a little extra step, but if you put a little crease, a little fold in them, they'll lay flat. But it's certainly something we can look into to see what that expense would be. One of the things that I've really tried to do is make everything that we're doing make sense. And so if everybody's saying they're sliding down into their, which I understand how frustrating that can be because I've had it happen to a parking garage card, we certainly will look into that. And even with the one complaint, it's worth looking into seeing what that expense would be. But I would encourage anybody that's listening, if you just put a little crease in it, it'll lay there just fine.
Very good. Thank you so much. Mr. Farmer had a comment or two.
I appreciate it very much. Sorry. Madam Chair, members of the council, thank you for your service, especially on this historic day. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll be brief. Mr. Means and I are working on a meeting of the Chevy Chase merchants for next Monday night at Buddy's. I haven't really cleared that with him yet because we've been talking about Tuesday, but I think that the biggest upshot is we're going to work together, and he's proven to be amenable to what I think are some very real concerns. But to go back to the example that is part of the petition I gave you, this is what we would like to keep because it does give us the opportunity to let customers still come to 4 steps from our door, feed the meter, and walk those 4 steps in. And as I looked on the Esplanade coming across just now, it is only about 4 or 5 steps from the front of the business to the machine there. And if you look at the map of the one in Chevy Chase, at least on our side of the street, you've got to walk the length of our business and the length of the business next door that is the Blue Moon, that is closed for basically 5 days a week. And that puts you 24 steps from my front door because you're now down in front of that larger dot in front of what almost looks like 821, but we are 821 on this end. Well, thank you. Anyway, I think the most important thing to understand is, and you as council members understand this, in many instances, one size does not fit all. And I think that's part of what goes on in Chevy Chase. Following up on the article that was in the paper this morning, I had several calls at the store from people who, in different ways, described themselves as older or not nimble or not able to get around for a certain reason or another. And Chevy Chase is one of those memory areas for a lot of people of Lexington, and it's the last place that they want to give up going to on their own. And to give up the convenience of being able to step from their car to their destination and back is what was echoed over and over again today. The Parking Authority is doing a good job, but a very hard job, because to a certain degree, sometimes they lose sight of the fact that this is a commodity that is parking, and they take it as a revenue plan. And the revenue plan is what he reflected in his comments in terms of, they've put these machines out there that cost between $10,000 and $13,000 each, or $8,000 or $10,000 each. And if we had had that conversation on the front end, maybe we would have been able to say to him, no, we don't want those. Maybe we do want these, and there's a way to make it happen. I still hope that we can make that happen. I'm not going to ask you all for any action today, but I want to make sure that you're aware of our conversations as we move forward, because it is a very challenging retail time, and as has been highlighted from the hours given, this is aimed at retail. This is from 8 until 5, and this is a time that is most important for the merchants out there. And there are a lot of merchants out there, but we coexist very well with people who have afternoon and evening businesses. In fact, many of them did sign the petition. So there's some unanimity there. There's the room for communication.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer.
Timed it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Means, I want to thank you commend you on the job that you're doing and your board. And I'm especially appreciative that the two of you will work together to find a solution in Chevy Chase. Thank you. We're now on council report. And first up is Councilmember James.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to be the first from this horseshoe to say congratulations to President Obama on this phenomenal, amazing, historical, monumental, emotional day. It's I watched the inauguration with probably 100 or 200 or 300 or so folks, and I didn't know that I was going to be so emotional about it. But it was to know that this is, someone mentioned earlier, yeah, the inauguration happens every 4 years, you know, and I thought, there's nothing like this. There's nothing like this. There hasn't been anything like this, and everyone needs to take a moment of pause to think about what this means. And I think make changes in your life based on that. And that's just my opinion from not necessarily as the 1st District representative, but personally. Look at what this means and look around you, look at this community, and think about what we can do to mimic what the nation has said and make sure we're living our lives that way. So I'm very proud to be an elected official right now. I'm very proud to be an American, and if President Obama is watching Channel 3, let me know how I can help you. Thank you.
Councilmember Henson.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to share with you all, we have a new bottle stop bus shelter on Versailles Road. I don't know if we can get that in clearer, but this was the first project for Arts in Motion. And I went to the ribbon cutting yesterday, and it is very, very pretty. I hope that through private and public funds, we were able to create this shelter, and I know that Lextran has plans for some more. So just wanted to share that with you. But I appreciate everybody that was involved in that, and it is unique. I believe the next one will be going up on Newtown Pike somewhere. Also, I'd like to make a motion to refer to the Services Committee a proposal to remove on-street parking and install a center turning lane in the 1300 block of Alexandria Drive.
We have a motion by Councilmember Henson, a second by Councilmember James. Do I hear discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Does that complete your report?
That's it.
Okay. Dr. Blues?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too would underline and echo Councilmember James's comments about the historic transition of power this afternoon. Something we do every 4 years, and something we always marvel at, no matter who the principal actors are. And this is, of course, an historic election, and one in which all Americans are challenged to do, in effect, what a former president, President Kennedy, asked us to do over 40 years ago, and that is to ask not what our country can do for us, but what we can do for our country to bring it back into a moral focus and economic stability, and again, a functioning community. So I think we all look forward to that effort, to being involved, to being engaged, and we wish the new president all the best. He will certainly need all of our support. A few announcements of some upcoming meetings in the 2nd District. On Saturday, January 23rd, the Brookfield Chase Neighborhood Association will meet at 2 p.m. at the Northside Library. Now, the Neighborhood Association will be discussing their bylaws for the Homeowners Association. They'll be working on some summer and spring projects. I encourage all of the residents to come out and participate in the organization and the programming for this relatively new Homeowners Association. Next Monday, January 26th, two neighborhood meetings. Oakwood Neighborhood Association meets at 7 o'clock in the community center at Oakwood Park. And on the same evening, the Radcliffe Marlboro Neighborhood Association will meet in the community center in Marlboro Park. That's also at 7 p.m. Thank you, Madam Chairman. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Blues. Councilmember Ellinger.
Thank you, Chair. We recently received the audit from our internal audit on the Fayette County Detention Center, and in there I think there were some issues that we need to address, and I think the normal process is probably put that into Budget and Finance and have the Budget and Finance. So at this point I would make a motion that we put the audit, the internal audit for the community corrections into Budget and Finance, and I would hope that we could put it on this next meeting if we could, which would be the 27th. So moved.
Councilmember Ellinger moved and Councilmember Beard seconded to put the audit report of the Fayette County Detention Center and Budget and Finance Committee. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. And Councilmember Crosby.
Thank you. I'd just like to announce that there is a Citizens Fire Academy getting ready to start. I believe it's Monday night, and I think there are still probably a few spots left. I think Councilmember Gordon has done, have you done that? Yeah, last one. So, class one. Oh, I thought you said the last one. The class one, the very first class. If you have any questions, of course, you can call her office, but or you can call mine if you want information about how to get registered for that. I think there might be a few spots left. I'm seeing some nods in the back of the room too. But you can contact my office and we can get you in touch with the appropriate people at 258-3214. And also, just speaking while we're on the subject of fire, I just want to thank the Fraternal Order of Firefighters. They had a fundraiser on Sunday for their Shop with the Firefighters program, which benefits kids going back to school, providing them with school supplies. And they had some former UK football players out and firefighters, and they had a chicken wing eating contest. And I'm happy to say when I got there, I thought I was getting set up to participate, and gladly they did not make me do that. But it was very fun to watch, I will say that. And the football players can out eat the firefighters. I did find that out. So I want to thank them for having me out for that and get signed up for the Fire Academy. Thanks.
Councilmember Stinnett.
Thank you. Just a couple general announcements, a couple meetings come up. One, we have the Liberty Park, which recently we gained access to via the Starshoot Parkway Liberty Road construction project. And we'll be having a public meeting with all the folks in Hamburg as well as the Liberty Road corridor on February the 10th at Eastland Church of God at 6:30 to kind of go over and start the first meeting in the process to brainstorm about what we want in terms of amenities in Liberty Park. So we'll be making several announcements over the next couple of weeks on that meeting, but it'll be 6:30 on February the 10th, again at Eastland Church of God, which is located there at the intersection of Starshoot and Liberty Roads. Then the second neighborhood meeting, the 6th District Annual President's Meeting, will be this upcoming Tuesday, the 27th, over at Spencerian College at 6:30 p.m. So all of our neighborhood presidents, as well as any guests that would like to come, including our at-large folks, if you all can attend. I know the mayor will plan on being there as well next Tuesday night on the 27th. Thank you.
Do any other council members have a report? If not, I would simply like to report a couple of things. The Stormwater Fee Task Force met on January the 15th, and the major item that was decided upon was the basic ERU, the unit for on which the fee would be based, and the decision was made to suggest 2,500 square feet for residential. The next meeting will be on January the 22nd at 9 a.m. at the Central Library here downtown in the basement conference room. And the topic for the meeting on January 22nd will be expenses and costs for the stormwater program. And I want to thank again Rama, Commissioner, and his computer folks for getting the minutes of these task force meetings on our website. so that citizens can take a look at them. And if you have any questions, I know that Charlie Martin and Commissioner Cheryl Taylor have been trying to be at every work session to answer any questions as we continue to go forward with the Stormwater Fee Task Force. Secondly, I've had information that our newest council member, Councilmember Doug Martin, will be sworn in this Thursday, possibly right before the council meeting. Is that correct, at 7 o'clock? Okay, here in the council chamber. So we will have a full complement then of council members, so that'll be a good thing. Next on our agenda is the mayor's report. Do I hear a motion to accept the mayor's report, which came by email? I have a motion by Dr. Blues. Do I hear a second? Councilmember Henson, second. Councilmember Stennett has a question.
If I'm not mistaken, I thought we had talked about the Black and Williams Center. I see there's an appointment on that board, possibly about redoing and restructuring some how we manage that building, and as well as the board. I'm not sure if it'd be appropriate to continue appointing people to that board, because it could change here in the near future. I believe it's in one of our committees already. I'm not sure which one we put it into ultimately, but does anybody have any information on that?
Councilmember Blues?
This is a nomination that I made actually several months ago, and Michael Haskins is the president of the Georgetown area neighborhood association, and I think he can be a very helpful contributor on the board, even if this turns out to be a transitional stage. So I endorse that nomination.
Yeah, it's not a question of the nomination or that person. It's a question of do we need to appoint people to boards that could change the whole structure. We could be in the process of changing that board.
Right.
If you're comfortable with that, he understands what that could mean on down the road, and then that's fine with me.
Is there any other comment on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. And finally on our agenda, we have public comment for issues that are not on the agenda. And I don't know if there's anyone signed up. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? No? All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor, say aye. Meeting's adjourned.